So I was involuntarily volunteered last week. Gus, Ben. And so it kind of spurred me to, what do I want to talk about? I mean, what am I going to give this about? Because I wasn't really ready. So immediately, why Gus and Ben are no longer my friends, but it was a really quick and easy answer, and so I wasn't going to be able to fill 15, 20 minutes up with that, because you just don't volunteer somebody other than yourself. So I had to come up with topic number 2. Is it possible to have Gus deported to Mexico?
Impossible.
You don't know. I contacted Sheriff Joe's office.
I was actually born in the U.S.
No. All right. So I had to move on from that then too, clearly. And I just decided that I wanted to spend my time talking about something that I like. I like art. I like photography in particular. Growing up, my mom did a lot of photography at home. My dad even kind of built her own darkroom in the house so that not only could she take her own photographs, but she could develop her own film at home. Because back in those old days, we had to develop film. And so I think it just kind of gave me an appreciation for photography and kind of the work behind the photo and what you really have to do to get that one great shot. After college, my best friend did some work at the Fahey Klein Gallery in Los Angeles, and they specialize strictly in photography. And so every 1 or 2 months, they would get a new exhibit show in their gallery, and on the opening night, I would go in and help out and typically bartend for them. And so it was through them I really kind of got a better appreciation for art and really got to know some of the artists. Annie Leibovitz was a big contributor to their gallery. She did a number of shows. Unfortunately, she never came to one of the exhibits because it would have been pretty incredible to meet her, but she specializes in portrait photography. She has photographed just about every major Hollywood star. She did that Demi Moore shot. She did the Miley Cyrus shot that had, I think it was on Vanity Fair, that had everyone in an uproar because she was naked and like 14. So she's a bit controversial, but she really has a trademark look and style. Peter Beard was another big character in their gallery. He's very well known for his photography of Africa and all the animals there. He sort of developed his style to not only take photographs, but then to sort of collage on top of them. He would collage with animal blood, dirt, leaves, fabric. Fantastic photography, really talented guy, just a character. Diane Arbus is another photographer that came in their office, and she is a trip. Her photography focuses on what most people would call ugly and surreal. She preferred to photograph the deviant and marginal people, dwarfs, giants, transgender people, nudists, circus performers. I believe the exhibit that they held for her was based in the Ozarks of the Appalachians. So it was people that it was, this is my wife and my sister and my cousin, and they're usually talking about the same person. So there were interesting photos. I set the bar up in a side room that had none of her photos displayed because her imagery sticks with you. There's a lot of nudity, a lot of hair. Yeah, strange body parts. So if you, we went to an art show in San Francisco and she had an exhibit there, and I sent my friend in. I was like, I'm not going through that again, so you can go in there, and I stayed outside. So if you want some images that will stick with you, she'd be the one to check out. By far my favorite is Phil Stern, and that's who I'm going to kind of talk about and show some of his photographs. This is by far one of his most well-known photos of James Dean. He was quite a character. Quick highlights: born in 1919, began his photography career working for the New York Police Gazette as a studio apprentice and their photographer. From there, he was sent to Los Angeles, where he began working in Hollywood, freelancing for Life and Collier's magazines. In 1942, he enlisted in the Army, and he joined the ranks of the Derby Rangers as a combat photographer. And he was kind of right there front and center in all of the invasions that were happening, taking photos, working with the soldiers. And he was injured in battle. And so after 2 years, he was sent home. He returned to LA, where he just kind of dove right back into the Hollywood scene, shooting album covers. He was on set for movies and just kind of a behind the scenes with all of the Hollywood elite. I kind of want to take a quick look at some of his combat photography, his jazz period, and then his Hollywood subjects. So with the Army, World War II, he was there, combat photographer, covering the invasions of North Africa and Sicily. He was well known and respected among his war colleagues because he was just really always front and center. It didn't matter if they were just practicing, there's live gunfire going on, he was right there in the front of it all. So we just have these two shots, a bunch of them walking in, some of them securing one of the harbors. And then this is them kind of infiltrating, coming in off the boat and taking over the bay. Like I said, he was injured. He was wounded in action, and he actually earned a Purple Heart for his time there. Coming back into the States, he went through a big jazz period. I think he photographed over 60 album covers. He was big on the scene with, I think, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, Ray Charles. His series of pictures with Dizzy Gillespie always just kind of caught me because it's rather impressive, the cheek span that man was able to get while he played his instrument. It was always impressive. Then moving back into Hollywood, he did quite a set chronicling James Dean. He met James Dean, total fluke accident. James Dean almost ran head on into him on a motorcycle, and so they pulled over in traffic. He was yelling at him, and at that point, that's when he learned it was James Dean. And the story goes on something of they had lunch the next day, and James Dean just kind of really became enamored with him and took him to the movie set he was working on and just had him follow him for a number of years up until his death, taking photos and being his buddy. Marilyn Monroe was another one of his big subjects. He had a lot of behind the scenes movie set photos following her and her daily rituals and getting dolled up for everything. I think that the thing that was so interesting about Phil is he was really good at capturing the famous in really subtle, unguarded moments. They were used to having him on set, but then it kind of he became one of their friends, and so there was a lot of hanging out with buddies at the table and all kinds of stories and trouble. John Wayne on a horse and John Wayne in really tight short shorts, which just had to be shared. It was too good not to pass up. So he was on a lot of Western sets, kind of hanging out with them. Audrey Hepburn, Marlon Brando. I think it's really interesting that a lot of his Hollywood subjects, it's kind of when they were young before they really hit it big, and you kind of got to see how Hollywood changed them, how they grew with it. Rock Hudson, Sammy Davis Jr. Phil Stern became very good friends with Frank Sinatra, and I think he photographed Frank Sinatra for a good 50 plus years, over 50 years, from when Frank was very young. Nobody really knew him. He was just this skinny guy with really big ears to just this huge icon. There are a lot of Rat Pack photos. He did quite a bit of touring with the Rat Pack for a lot of their shows, behind the scenes. He has a good series of them all in Vegas, at the Sands and everything. I think he has a whole series of photos of Sammy Davis Jr. dancing on a rooftop in Hollywood, and just the air and the leaps he was getting, but I don't think I copied those. Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Alfred Hitchcock is in the far picture. He even has some of pictures of Steven Spielberg on set for some of his very, very early movies. These are some of the other Hollywood sets. It is, I think, a West Side Story rehearsal. And then that's Sophia Loren on one of the sets. I think it's for Legends of the Lost. He had early Elizabeth Taylor photos as well. And then because of his friendship with Frank Sinatra, he was invited to photograph John F. Kennedy's inauguration. So he has photos all of the actual ceremony, Frank Sinatra's performance at the ceremony, and then some of the behind the scenes photos of Frank Sinatra and JFK partying and hanging out together. The thing that was most interesting about Frank Sinatra and JFK is just being able to photograph those two, because it's just that irresistible attraction between power and glamour, and kind of a strange union between politics and celebrity, which was happening back then, and it still sort of seems to happen today, where celebrities become so well known that they become quite prolific on politics, and they want to go out and talk about it, and because they're a star, everybody listens to them. So it was an interesting series of those two. A lot of questions were always brought up of these two being together and with their questionable morals and how they always spent so much time together partying and carousing through the Hollywood scene. And then this is one of my favorite pictures of his. It's just Frank Sinatra walking down a hallway. I was very fortunate, and I got to meet Phil Stern. He did a show at Fahey Klein, and when I showed up that evening for the opening party, I walked in and my best friend comes up. She goes, you're going to love the show, you're going to love the show. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And she's like, it's Phil Stern. And I was like, no way. So it was something to be able to stand in front of even this picture and the James Dean sweater photo, to see it in person. And then she turns to me and she goes, Phil Stern's coming tonight. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. And it was for his book release. He just published this book of his photos. And she said, he's coming and he's going to sign the books. We're selling them. And so at a point in the evening when things got sort of a little quiet, I was able to go and sit down with him. He came rolling into the gallery. He was probably 80-something at the time, came in pulling his oxygen tank, oxygen plugs in his nose, and he sat there. So I got to go over with my book and sit down and kind of have a moment and chat with him. And he really is engaging, and it was like I'd known him forever. He just sat down and started talking. And so he actually signed, personalized, and dated my book. I was trying to buy one of his prints then because I'm like, this guy is famous, he's still alive, it's gonna be affordable. And I was young and couldn't do it and kind of kicked myself. And that man is still alive. Everything I was looking at, researching this, I'm like, okay, when did he die? When did he die? I'm thinking, no way, I met him in 2004 and he's still kicking. Fahey Klein just did another show for him this January and February, and everything says he's still living in Los Angeles. So he is pushing 94, 95 years of age right now and still going. And that's Phil Stern. And that's it. Thanks, Gus and Ben.